the reset that they are talking about, you're going to play the game whether you want to or not. You're either going to be a victim or a beneficiary. There are only two sides to this. It's a binary outcome. Hi, everyone. I've got Chris Martinson with me and Jeff Clark for another one of our little roundtable discussions here. Chris, how are you doing?
Oh, thanks for asking. I'm doing really well. It's winter. We just got winter. I'm jealous of Puerto Rico all of a sudden.
Well, our seasons are quite different. It rains all summer long. That's the rainy season. And right now we switch over to the dry season, which is usually in the mid 70s, low 80s, and it rains much less. The humidity is lower. So this is the part where it becomes perfect down here. Jeff, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, and we have winter here too. And Chris, I'll tell you that it dipped into the 50s last night, so it's really, really cold here.
Oh boy, right, we really know how to rub it in, don't we?
Yeah.
Well, what's the temperature there overnight, Chris?
I woke up to snow this morning, so that's all I'm going to say. That's it. We'll leave it there.
The first snow is great.
Yeah,
it's after you've spent a few weeks in it that it becomes a chore. What were you going to say, Jeff?
Oh, I was just going to say it's great to be back with you guys, and I want to jump in because there's so much we could be talking about.
Please.
In fact, I had to whittle my list down. I had about 10 different things, and I tried to whittle it down to 3. So let's jump right in. And this first topic is an article that came out yesterday, which would have been, November 17th, Tuesday. And it's about the comments that the Fed Chair Jerome Powell made. He said that the recovery has, quote, a long way to go, and that as a result, and this is what I ask you about, quote, this isn't the right time to worry about the fiscal health of the United States, end quote. So my question to you, and Mike, I'll jump to you first. Even if the Senate stays Republican, we should expect more currency printing, right? And what ramifications do you think we should expect from the poor fiscal health of the U.S. that is clearly not only here, but going to get worse?
Well, I've got a couple of answers, but I want to quote, or at least paraphrase, a good friend of mine, Richard Doty, a.k.a. the Mogambo Guru, where he says, we're freaking doomed. Their answer can't be anything except print currency. The Federal Reserve and most major economists do not understand that the wealth is the stuff in society, all of the goods and services that we create for one another. And what they're doing is debasing the measurement tool. That's what currency is. It's just a tool for measuring and then transferring value. There's no other purpose for currency. It is not wealth. If you had all the currency in the universe, but there was nothing that you could buy with it, it's worthless. The very fact that we're using these national fiat currencies that are just whipped into existence based on a promise to pay something is just totally insane. All currency is based on debt. So if you have $1 in your pocket, that's just proof that debt exists somewhere, because dollars and any other fiat currency on the planet do not come into existence without debt. So somebody is basically on the hook for this. And with all of the base currency that's created, anything from the Federal Reserve, the debt that comes with that is usually treasuries. And those treasuries have to be paid for out of our taxes. So basically, if you've got currency, it's owed back by somebody in the future. So this is a game that they're playing that can only end in them destroying the currency. It's just not possible at this point with more lockdowns. And what Jerome Powell said confirms that. It's absolute proof that currencies around the planet are doomed. We are in an end game of this fiat currency system, and they're going to try to do everything they can to keep the game going, and that includes the crypto or digital or blockchain central bank currencies that all of the central banks around the planet are coming out with. Chris, what do you think on that?
I think you're exactly right. It might have been Mugambo Guru that first clued me into the word scroomed, which is a contraction of screwed and doomed put together, because Jerome Powell says now is not a good time to worry about the fiscal health. You know what? Pro tip, it's never a good time, right? This is the proverbial camel nose under the tent kind of thing. It's a whole herd of camels and the whole tent's been lifted in the air. They can't undo this, and here's why. If right now they're deficit printing, I don't know what, $3 to $4 trillion. It's got a run rate of over 10 trillion a year, but I don't think they can sustain that of deficit printing for the U.S. government. The GDP is barely hanging on at that level, and here's the way the math works. If they're deficit printing at, say, 10% of GDP, which is higher than that right now on a run rate, and then they dial that back to 3%, that's a 7% loss of GDP. It's never a good time to do that. There's always a congressional election. There's always a reason, right? So here's the thing. This is permanent. This is the new permanent level of printing because nobody has the political stones to say now would be a good time to take that 7% hit to GDP to get us back to a more normal, sustainable level of only 3% deficit spending, right? So that's the story. All I really took from Jerome Powell's interview was that he was wearing a purple tie. His interviewer was wearing a purple jacket. I saw a thing with some interns at the Fed, and 3 out of 7 were wearing purple. So I think purple, we have to interpret purple. I don't know what to make of it.
Well, purple or not, there is some massive currency dilution going on, and the central bank is telling us it's going to continue. That will have ramifications because there is no free lunch. And of course, gold and silver are one of the best ways to protect yourself. So let's jump to the next topic here. And that is, my question is a Terminator or Transformer type of society coming? And I want to quote this, read this quote to you guys. And I want to know, should I be concerned about things like this that might be coming? Globalist Klaus Schwab made it clear that transhumanism is an integral part of, quote, the Great Reset, when he said that the fourth industrial revolution would lead to a fusion of our physical, digital, and biological identity, which in a book he said is implantable microchips in our head that can read our thoughts. So I don't know how serious to take this, but Chris, let me start with you. Is this something serious? Is this something that's coming down the road? What's your reaction to a report like this?
Hey, Klaus, you first. So Klaus is
right.
Klaus is, for people who don't know, he founded the World Economic Forum, aka the Davos meeting that happens every year. You know, those beloved billionaires who fly their jets into that little town in Switzerland, and they're so beloved that they have to ring the whole town with snipers beforehand and stuff like that, just to make sure that the people's love doesn't spill over too far, I guess. So yeah, they have plans. They're using this whole COVID-19 thing to talk about a Great Reset, which has been in the works for a long time. And the Great Reset, there's parts of it I actually understand to an extent where they say, hey, there really aren't enough resources for the whole world to continue on the path it's been on. And then once you strip away the happy talk, there's another layer under that, which basically sounds, you could not be faulted for interpreting it this way, which is to say, we'd rather have those resources for our jets, than for your little cars, I think is part of that story. But however that gets parsed out, they're correct in assessing that the world is on an unsustainable course. I'm a little disappointed that a main thrust of that is to say, and the solution to that is implantable chips so that we can merge your biological, digital, and physical selves. I didn't quite follow that jump. And so I'm not a huge fan of that angle of it, but I do think it's time to start having a conversation that says we can't keep on the path we're on. Our monetary path is obviously self-destructive. We need a debt reset. I think there's room to argue for an ecological reset. The conversation needs to be had. I think Klaus is off mark when he says it's time for implantable chips. That I didn't follow that jump, but I am open to having a different conversation which says where are we going? This looks unsustainable. And of course, that's my work in the world. I tell people we are. And so you should personally prepare for that. And I know you want to get to that later, so we can segue later. But that's what I have to say about that.
Yeah, it's a great reset. It's coming, a monetary one, but jumping to implantable microchips. Mike, what do you think?
I think these people are dangerous. I think that, it's really interesting that they think that they have this privileged place in society and that they get to determine what happens with the world. And then people are willing to go along with it. I've never been, I always used to say, and Dan was actually the one that came up with this, I don't deal in conspiracy theory, I deal in conspiracy fact. And so I've steered away from these things for a long, long time because I didn't have proof. But now they're coming out every day and saying this stuff, and all of these conspiracy theorists were right. They were the ones we should have been listening to.
Right.
I thought they were nuts, but they're not. There's people that are really trying to take over the world, control everybody's lives, limit the population. What are they going to do with these microchips? They get to control you, is what they want to do. And I'm sure that one of their goals would be to reduce the size of the planet's population. And I'm sure that they're not on the list for reduction. They see themselves as, just like Chris said, they want it all for their jet fuel. I think it's crazy, but the reset that they are talking about, you're going to play the game whether you want to or not. You're either going to be a victim or a beneficiary. There are only two sides to this. It's a binary outcome. And so if you want to be a beneficiary, you have to put yourself on a proper side of this. And, there's areas of our lives where we're all going to be victims, because I just don't think the future is as bright as it used to be. But if you've got some resilience and sustainability in your life, and go to Chris's channel, Peak Prosperity, for all of that. You're going to find out a lot if you go over to that channel about how to prepare for what's coming up right now. But then when it comes to financial, this could be the best thing that ever happened to you in this. I've been writing about this. I was expecting in the crisis of '08 for this to play out, and then we'd come out with a healthy recovery, but they didn't let the markets and everything clear to the point where we could start a brand new bull market in stocks and things, and where currencies could be stable, and where they could run this without all of these enormous deficits that are so self-destructive. They didn't Greenspan didn't let it happen, then Bernanke didn't let it happen, then Yellen, and now we've got Powell. They keep on slapping Band-Aids on this bubble, this balloon that's about to burst. Well, they keep on blowing air at it at a greater and greater pace. And a hole springs up and they slap another Band-Aid on, expecting a good outcome. It can't have a good outcome unless you're invested in precious metals, possibly cryptocurrencies, I think most likely cryptocurrencies. And then you should also have a plan for being as resilient as possible personally, and having access to food. We're getting to a point where they're talking about food shortages, supply chain disruptions with this next lockdown, and people are getting scared of that. I'm purchasing a small farm and getting ready for this. I've got my own solar power. The internet down here is not all that reliable in Puerto Rico, so I'm expecting the potential for problems there. But I've got my own clean water sources, power sources, and place to grow food. That's the path I'm headed down, with a lot of precious metals. That's my main investment. So,
yeah, very good. And that kind of is the third topic I wanted to ask you guys. And Chris, I was really impressed on your site, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you've kind of switched from looking at the problem and diagnosing the problem that is staring us all in the face, and switched over to more solution-based action right now. So if that's correct, can you share with us and share with the viewers what you're personally doing in terms of a solution to deal with all the things that we're going through, not just right now, but what you think is coming down the road over the next few years?
Well, sure. This is it's really important that people have that context, and you're right. For a long time, I was in problem definition space because it's really hard for people to get their heads around something this big that's happening. And this is super big, right? This is like the biggest shift that's going to happen in anybody's lifetime, or maybe in 100 lifetimes. This is ginormous, right? So it takes a lot of sort of consistent sort of data and convincing because it takes a while to get your head around it. Well, enough people have their head around it. It's time to say, great, what are you going to do about that? And so we talk about resiliency and being resilient, and we break that down around 8 forms of capital that if you're rich in all 8 of these, you are going to be resilient, right? Still no guarantees of that it's all going to turn out great, but you have a much better chance. And so that's what we're really doing here, is loading the dice in our favor in this story. And by the way, everything we would recommend are things that Adam Taggart, my co-founder of Peak Prosperity, and myself that we're doing, that you just heard Mike is doing it. Like, we walk the talk. And so if you go down this path of resiliency, our guarantee, because we can guarantee this, is that you won't regret it, because we're talking about things that will make you happier, secure your wealth. You'll be in greater control of the things that you can. You'll have deeper relationships. So the things that you can control, because Mike's right, there's nothing we can do about this great reset except decide how we want to position ourselves for it, because it's coming. There's nothing I can do about Federal Reserve printing, but it's coming. Right? More, not besides what's happened. So you look at the big trends. That's the problem definition. What do you do about it? My own personal response. I have cows and chickens and raised pigs this year. I've got a garden. I'm actually working on my soil. I think soil is the key to everything. So to the extent I can, I'm building that up. I bought a place that specifically had an uninterruptible spring-fed water source. These are the things that make me feel good, that I can take care of Maslow's hierarchy of need bottom rung. Food, shelter, safety, warmth, right? Those are the things that I care about. Water. But because I have those, I'm free to do the other stuff I want in life, which is to be happy, be healthy, have a life of meaning and purpose and all of that. So we're not into this as a question of survival. We're not interested in that. We're interested in get yourself squared away so that you can be resilient, so you can have as rich and meaningful a life as you possibly can. And I know for a lot of people that sounds like a tall order, given how crazy everything is out there right now, but it's possible. And of course, some people will play the game really well and thrive, and other people will get caught up by things. And the difference between those two groups is, do you understand the game that's actually being played out right now? And so, that is, if not problem definition, making sure you have the appropriate context. You got to know what's happening monetarily. If you haven't watched and rewatched The Hidden Secrets of Money to actually understand the difference between currency and money and what the game is, then you should do that right away. If you don't understand what Davos crowd or the World Economic Forum is really saying when they say, we need this great reset, when you peel it back, they're really saying the pie can't expand like it used to. We're going to talk completely about how this pie gets re-divvied up. You want to make sure you understand where that pie is, who's on the receiving end of this fixed pie, and who's just lost a chunk of their slice. So that's really the story there. But then, please become resilient. Financial capital, social capital, living capital, cultural capital, these all matter. Very, very important right now.
Yes, very good point. And if you haven't visited the Peak Prosperity website, there's a wealth of information there that can really help people get started on this resilient lifestyle. And so, Mike, you've talked about it before, but how are you personally becoming more resilient for what you think is ahead?
Well, before I get on that, I want to touch on something that Chris just said. He said, this is going to be the biggest thing that has happened in our lifetimes, or perhaps 100 lifetimes. Now, when I was writing my book, and when I used to make appearances with Robert Kiyosaki, I was saying that this is the greatest wealth transfer in history. I was the one that coined that phrase. I had read somebody that said that back in 1998, I can't remember, the Great Disorder or something like that. I can't remember the author's name. And he said that wealth is never destroyed, it's merely transferred. And when I read that, I went, oh my God, this is the greatest wealth transfer in history. And I started saying that, and Robert was saying, what does that mean, wealth transfer? Well, what it means is that it doesn't matter what the price of gold and silver do. What matters is how much stuff it buys you in the future. And if it goes up 10 or 100-fold or more in how much stuff it actually purchases, because because of the number of people that trust all of these fiat currencies and don't get prepared themselves, if they aren't ready for it, they're going to see this huge wealth transfer of absolute purchasing power from the masses, the people that aren't prepared, that don't own gold, silver, and cryptos, to them. And so it happens at this ratio. If there's 1,000 people that aren't prepared, for every one that is, it's 1,000 to 1 wealth transfer. And that's what Chris is talking about when he says this may be the biggest event in 100 lifetimes, because it is. We keep on pushing this thing right to the edge of a cliff, expecting that somehow time is not going to march forward, that we don't have to fall into this huge canyon of debt that we've created. So, what I'm doing to make myself more resilient, like I said, right now I'm trying to catch up with Chris. He's quite a bit ahead of me when it comes to the ability to produce food. But I've got a place now where I've got a great water source. And I already purchased my solar panels and Tesla power walls. And so I'm going to have my own power, my own water, and my own food sources, just in case the monetary system completely collapses. The tail risks on this, there's something, when you're talking about the bell curve of probabilities, there's something called kurtosis, where that bell curve can become shifted toward one side or the other of potential outcomes. And this bell curve has been shifted to where I don't believe that there's any possibility of having what would be considered a good outcome, where everything just goes back to normal again, and the stock markets keep on going up, and televisions stay cheap, and everything is always available to us, and you're going to have strawberries in winter that are flown in from New Zealand and all of that kind of stuff. That we're not going back to that. That I don't see as any possibility now on this bell curve of probabilities. And the longer they keep on doing this, a modern dark age, I mean, beyond just another Great Depression, that's actually a high probability now, some sort of very large Great Depression. It might be that we get back to a sluggish and slow economy that doesn't reach the GDP levels that we had before this pandemic. It may not reach that for decades. We just have this real slow, sluggish economy. I think it's a higher probability that we're going into a severe not recession, but depression, and that there is this, one of the things that Elon Musk is trying to prevent is a modern dark age. He believes that there's a potential that could happen. And I believe that with these people at Davos and stuff, and the way the world's central banks think about economics, they just don't understand that wealth is stuff, goods and services, and they think that wealth is the measurement device that measures the goods and services, and that creating more of the measurement devices will get us out of this problem, and it doesn't. It transfers wealth. I just want to be on the receiving end of that transfer if I can help it. If they're going to do this anyway and crash the world economy, I just want to be on the receiving end of this, because that's everybody's choice at this point. So what was your question? I just went off on Chris's topic of this being the biggest event in 100 lifetimes. It is. We're here. So right. What was your question again, Jeff?
We're here, and like you said, it's a binary event. Either you're going to be a victim or you're going to benefit from this wealth transfer. And it all starts with becoming resilient, which all starts with owning a meaningful amount of physical gold and silver. So that's really the issue. Don't stick your head in the sand. Make sure that you are prepared for the kinds of things that are most likely going to be ahead. So,
and go to Chris's site, and if you live in an apartment, start a windowsill garden. Start something where if for some reason the supermarket shelves are empty, you still have the ability to eat. So there's a lot of information on that on the Peak Prosperity site.
yes, very good. Well, thank you guys for addressing these topics. This was fun, and I will see you guys again in 2 weeks.
Okay, thanks, Jeff.
All right. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Chris.